Often we talk about consumer economy and the stuff that we consume as people in the world. And the whole focus you see everywhere is like, how can we make sure that people don't consume too much, or how can everybody in the world consume enough, the inequality and all that stuff. But what does not get talked about at all is if we think of the consuming metaphor, like food metaphor, then we just don't do like one way eating. We also shit, right? And we never talk about the whole economic side of waste. Only when we talk about it, it's like, yeah, you have to recycle and stuff like that. But why is it that the framing, even if we talk about it, why is it the framing is it's consumer economy and waste happens to be something we have to take care of? Like, what if it's like just called general economy and waste has as much value as consumption? Because it has in everyday life, right? And there's a kind of a privileging of like only consumption. And I was just thinking, like, how would it be? How would it look like if we turned it around? Like maybe even think of like a waste way of looking at world or design or stuff, or having a more balanced view of, not thinking of ourselves as consumers. Like when I look at a phone or television or an app to download, but also as a shitter. Like, how would I be a shitter of an app? Like, what are the kind of waste I produce when I download it? As a necessity, not even as a, it's every time I shit, I'm like, oh shit, that's true, I shit too. I don't know. It's like I am a shitter, and if I consume, accidentally I consumed also, or I consume too shit. So shit as the tail off as the purpose of consuming.
I, I I think it's interesting too that shit is shit no matter what food you consume. Like,
It gets all in one form, like the
yeah.
yellow goo. I mean, unless you have diarrhea, it's a bit different color, but yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one.
So what does data shit look like? Is it like couch data or something? Like what is it, metadata? Like what is that? What does it look like?
You
Yeah.
mean data you found on a couch? No, no, that's a bad joke. Sorry.
Coach, is it coach? Am I pronouncing it right? Couch
Co-
data, like the data that gets trapped, like cookies and all that.
Like, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that and also all the enormous amount of data that we produce when we do anything. So, for example, I don't know about the Zoom call, they might be recording IP and all kinds of stuff that has nothing to do with this conversation. That is looking at
Metadata. So metadata is shit. It's excrement,
in
basically.
some ways, especially if it's at least shit to me. What is shit? One man's shit is another man's gold. Right? It could be, right? And
but
that's ecology.
you
But
could also
valuable, yeah.
you could also go beyond metadata and say like the content you upload to Facebook, right? Right, like in the moment it might have some sort of significance in, like, just showing somebody what you did that weekend, but it kind of has no shelf life, right? Like it doesn't have any value beyond that, and it's kind of shit. Like it's kind of builds up in a shit
Expire.
sense, right? Like, because
I mean, it expires after a while. Then
yeah,
starts like rotting.
like I don't use Facebook anymore, like, so when I left Facebook. No, when
Better
I
than us. You're
when I
better
left
than us.
when I left Facebook a couple of years ago, I did the whole download my archive thing. So download all of my content, and it was kind of weird. Like I downloaded it all, and I had a quick look through it, and I was just like, "Fucking hell!" Like I used this thing for I don't know, like 10 years, and it was just shit. Like it was shit. When I was looking at it outside of Facebook, I'm sure the same. I'd be the same looking at it inside Facebook, but just looking at it in this kind of downloaded shit, it was just like a whole bunch of shit. Like, and I've never looked at this content again, to the point where I'd be happy to just delete that folder and just forget about it. Um, but yeah, it's shit, and and I think taking it out of Facebook helped me realize that. But yeah, I don't know, like we kind of convince ourselves that there's this sentimental value or some sort of you know, ability to reflect on things, but
Don't
really
tell that
it's
to a hacker, because they actually do have very emotional connections to data. Like they have data fetish. That is an
yeah.
actual thing. So
Mm.
Yeah,
Actually,
because
yeah,
I think
especially reading about sorry, Anuj,
no, go ahead, go ahead.
but I'm going to talk. Uh, especially reading about the especially reading about the so reading I've been reading about kind of old school, like the original hackers, the you know, the ones that were you know, I should know names, but like the guys that like basically came up with the name hacker. What university was it? It wasn't MIT, was it? It was like
Stanford.
Stanford, yeah. And you know, their obsession with the freedom of information, and you know, just any kind of passwording is like considered anti-hacker in this old traditional kind of definition of hacking. So yeah, you're right. Like they did have this kind of um, fetish for data. Sorry, my dog is.
That's cool. It's interesting because when you said that all the Facebook data was just shit,
Yeah.
I mean, it does make sense in that way. If you want to take Facebook side, and it's like, why do you guys all like get worked up on us selling your data? Even it's shit. It's not like your data is
Oh
like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
only
yeah.
because our platform is so awesome that it makes your shit into gold.
No, but see, this is where it's dangerous. Okay, so this
Yeah.
is where it's that's a really interesting perspective, because that's if you believe that just by saying something is shit, therefore it's kind of waste, right? But even like your physical shit, if the wrong person has access to your physical shit, they can know a lot about you, right?
Yeah, by the chemical DNA and
Yeah.
lots of stuff. Actually, that's true. What kind of food you usually eat and stuff.
And a dangerous thing about sharing, or the sharing, to use cliches, the
Oh,
sharing economy is that the shit isn't shit in the context of sharing. Like if you're sharing something with someone, then that's where the value for it comes from. But as soon as you take it out of the sharing context, you can really easily see that it's not worth anything, right? Its value is
yeah,
only in the
because
sharing.
you don't have the tools to do mining on that shit.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why it looks like shit. I mean,
Because
the
you don't
difference
want to,
between
right? Why
Facebook,
would you want to do that to
yeah,
yourself? Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But if you had that, like similar, like you don't have a way to turn your shit to manure. But if you had, then if you know, like every day you've been shitting, they have been making manure and making that. That's like enormous money. You're like, can I get some of that manure coin, please? You know, and that's
Manure coin. Yes.
But can you
someone
imagine,
should do it.
like imagine a like an Instagram influencer, okay, who suddenly, like, they're not banned from the platform, they just have their followers taken away from them, and they just sit there looking at their feed, right? Like that would be a pretty significant moment for them when they look at their content and they're the only audience of their content, right? Um, because I think sorry, I know I keep lingering on this same kind of perspective, but it's just helping me realize, like, one way that you can think of a product, or our use of a product, being converted into shit,
But
right?
yeah, but
Yeah.
hang on. I just want to say, like, sometimes people just put up like content for like almost like an archive, like for themselves.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I just have this friend who's like, oh, it's not about sharing, it's about like for myself, like being able to remember what I did in my life, having like some sort of record of all the things, of the places I traveled, you know. It's not necessarily to have people like put their likes up on it, right? It's for
mm,
myself. So one can also like value their shit. Like one can also like
yeah.
harness and cultivate it, you know?
And that's what's interesting about that is, your friend is is people at Facebook would probably categorize your friend as an edge case, right? As in they're using it not in the way that it was intended to be used.
That's right.
And somebody like that would probably never get served. Like if your friend is genuine in what they said to you, then if somebody made a tool specifically for that didn't have the sharing part, then your friend should be quite happy with that, right? Like that would serve the purpose. But because that doesn't really exist, maybe it does, I don't know, but maybe it does, whatever. But because that's kind of an edge case use, or like where we kind of think sharing is just now a standard feature, right? That product will never get made.
Yeah, that reminds me of
I mean,
MySpace. Oh, sorry, Anuj.
no, I
Go
was just
Yes.
ahead.
thinking sharing has resulted because sharing now is so much more easier than reading because like now most of the time people like skim to get to the share button,
Mm.
to like signal I read this awesome article, you know.
Yeah, this
And
represents me.
yeah, and then what happens? You end up creating enormous spam because if everybody keeps sharing everything, it's like I have some WhatsApp groups, like some family WhatsApp groups, like cousins and stuff. It's literally only forward, like only, like it's been days anybody has said anything to anybody. So and I'm thinking that, and in a case, it's like even like, and they're from India, which is like the worst COVID thing, and everybody's sharing about COVID, but nobody's saying how are you, this person, doing? Are you dying of COVID? Nobody. The people sharing stuff. So it's even in a way that like it seems for me garbage, that group, complete garbage, because I don't get anything out of it. I could read it, somebody else's. And even it's weird because in real life, if those cousins met after a while they're having dinner, imagine if all that they did for 2 hours is talk about other things that they read or heard. Did you hear? After a while, they'll be like, dude, that is rude. Like, we would not even once look at each other and say, "Oh, this is a nice shirt," or "I thought you would like this," or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think sharing has become so much easier. Like the effort we need to share than to read, that it has led to. It's like people are throwing stuff that they have and stuff that you have, thinking that somebody else will need it, and when they get it in, somebody else will need it, and when nobody needs it, and it's just enormous piles of shit,
Mm.
because it's like the using part of the consuming is like almost becoming nothing anymore because nobody's using the text, the blog or the whatever to read it. They
Yeah.
just want to just like throw it to people, like here you go. So I think we have a kind of a sharing epidemic. I know people love the sharing economy, and I am seeing the opposite. We have too much fucking sharing.
It's
Like,
interesting. It's interesting what you just said too. Like this this is something I think about a lot where, in the stuff that I'm doing where I'm researching about better, like help making it I'm trying to induce deeper reading off the screen, right? And one thing that I keep thinking about is, it's pretty common knowledge now. Like people are prepared to admit that they just skim articles, right? Um, um, but the articles are being written, right? Somebody's in a lot of cases, like they're taking the time and they're putting in the effort, and it's probably like a pretty involved process to write this content. But the content that's just skimmed is shit, right? Like it's just shit. It turns into shit as soon as it's published on the internet and people just skim it, and the sharing becomes the value, right? Not the content. Um, it's kind of a little bit sad in a way that the effort in making it is only really kind of realized in the sharing of it, not in the actual learning from it or experiencing it. You know what I mean?
yeah, in fact, this reminds me of how money works, because we never use money for what we are not like looking at a $10 note and like reading all the prints and the points and all that, like marveling at it. You just want to share, keep sharing it. If money cannot be shared, it just use the scrap of paper. That's why if you get a money from like a I don't know, from a state or a civilization that is not recognized anymore, it's just like it might have value for people who want to read that money and write books
Mm,
about how they used to have this kind of money, but it doesn't have value of its own. So a currency means something that is current, like electricity, like can move constantly. So in many ways, these articles, by being skim friendly and by having like not being read and just passed along, they act like currency for building up our social status. Like I am the one who has this latest information about COVID. I shared 20 articles. I shared 100 tweets in a day about my awesome life or anything. But it's not about the actual article, because if you actually read it, it will be like, first, you don't have time to read everything.
yeah.
Also, you're like, this was not worth sharing. This is why clickbaity and all that becomes very important, because if people have so much stuff that's coming, you have to make it clickbaity. So I think we are almost devolving. I mean, it's for good reason that money is kind of shit in terms of usability, because if you could use money for something, you wouldn't want to spend it. Like if you could, I don't know, if you could roll money to, I don't know, to clean your screens, for example,
Yeah.
then you would also do that, not always spend the money. So that's why there's a kind of it's called Grisham's law, that the money that is worst in using becomes the best in sharing, because people don't want to keep it to use it,
Mm.
you know. And that's the kind of case now with all these blogs and tweets and all this enormous shit of data. Like it's just currency. It's actually almost by design. Sometimes you would think that it is done in such a way by the platform designers that you end up writing shit, because so you always share, because if you share, it becomes like currency and you feel richer socially, social
Yeah.
capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Anuj had a conversation earlier about like the resources that are available on the internet and how that kind of reflects on creativity and art these days. And just having like an abundance of tools on the internet does not necessarily mean that, things are more creative per se. Even like making music or something like that, right? You have so many different samples of audio that you can just like bundle
Yeah.
together. But the thing is, like we were saying with Anuj, that that whole like originality and having like like having to use like a scarcity of resources usually produces something way more unique, and way more impressive than just like having all this abundance. And we were actually linking that to like the hacker ethic of how you have to make do with what you have, right? And you
Mm,
have to become really super creative to come up with something. Yeah.
yeah. That kind of resourcefulness. Uh,
Resourcefulness. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's just always so impressive to me when you see art that's like made out of these materials that you find outside, like even garbage. Like that to me, I think takes
Mm.
so much more, creativity to make something out of nothing.
That's interesting too, because that comes from also having strong ideas, right? Um, I think that strength of character as well. Like, if you're if you know what you want to do, then the resourcefulness kind of kicks in, and you'll go to any length to get that done. Whereas if you have this abundance of materials before you have the idea, you tend to make kind of derivative, um, you know, you know,
You make shit basically.
you make shit. Yeah,
More shit,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
You kind of make, yeah,
Yeah,
you probably end up following trends as well. Like that's where things like design trends come from. Like you get
Yeah.
these kind of cookie cutter designers who follow rules, and yeah, they make stuff that's either extremely plain and boring or going to be dated within a few months. um
and you see that, I remember having too much this. I mean, the more is less kind of idea in terms
mm,
of choice. It's true because, like, I grew up in Soviet communism, and when the first markets opened up, I remember I was an adult, and I remember when we realized that there was this concept of types of toothpaste. there was toothpaste. There was not like brand concept, right? Initially, it was very exciting, but then after a while, it was very paranoia inducing because we were like, I don't really know what's the point of having all like, okay, five, six kinds, but 20 kinds of toothpaste. How different? It's only toothpaste. They have to make another product to say that different, right? So it almost like this is why I don't like going to like supermarkets like in Europe in the suburbs, because suburbs they try to be like Costco style supermarkets, like in America, which is like enormous,
Yeah.
and I get lost and I feel it's just like garbage because it's like 90% of things is like who is enormous sizes, hundreds of variety, what you know
Mm.
and I think that there is a point to like this kind of where you know we have this kinds of weird paradox where because we have so much of everything in certain parts of the world, like in Europe, North America at least, that things have devolved to become garbage in many ways. Like we don't take, it gets devalued because you have too much of something, you know, and that happens a lot, and that happens with money as well. Like I remember in back when I was a student, I was like, I would think I'm rich if I had a little bit of money and I would be like very economical how to use it, but not now, not that economic I am anymore. So there's of course that I mean, and but at the same time, there's a weird kind of it's not all good or bad because this also becomes very bad economic in terms of say when Apple when it designs the MacBook Air, it looks super sexy, super thin, super light, like just a breeze of an experience. But it is because it is so thin, it is so tight. The way they basically like the way they do the battery and everything, like put it all around it. All there's nothing you can do with the MacBook Air once you're done using it. So it's like because they want to make it so lean, they end up making something so compact that ultimately once you're done using it, you can't do anything about it. You just have to throw it and make it in trash. But
Yeah.
if they kept every part separate and have the gaps more bulkier, we could still use parts. And I remember like something that I've talked earlier, I think Dan also with Steve is that in a kind of a Soviet era time, we would have this culture of like tinkering and making the best of everything because we had less amount of things. So
Yeah.
like we would take parts out of a computer and try to like use the LEDs for different kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
for example.
Mm-hmm.
Use a typewriter, like concept. Now you cannot do that. Everything comes so tightly designed because you don't want to have any waste. Then
Yeah.
you're lean and all that stuff. Ultimately ends up making enormous waste.
Yeah. There's a different perspective of what waste is, right? Like
Yeah.
when you call yourself a lean startup or something, right? Like it's those tightening of tolerances result in kind of things being stuck together. So like you're squashing things together, basically. You're squishing things together that um, if you wanted to pull them apart, you couldn't, right? Uh, that's a really abstract description. But I think the MacBook Air is a good illustration of that, right? Like it's yeah, like tolerances is probably Johnny Ive's favorite word, right? Like tight tolerances. Like there's probably not enough room inside the MacBook Air for air, right? It's like no single piece of space is wasted, and to do that, you can't just have reusable components. You can't have removable components. You sacrifice all of that. So by trying to be economical, you end up having this reverse effect where on the consumer, on the that that person that bought the thing. Um, and yeah, you're right. Like once a MacBook Air is obsolete, it's shit. Like it's waste.
Which is crazy, right? There are
Super
so many
expensive
other,
waste.
yeah, and there's so many good parts in a MacBook and all computers
Hmm.
that we should be able to use it for all other kinds of purposes. I have so many old computers in my house. Some of them have one or other thing not working properly.
Hmm.
What kind of like have like pluggable stuff like it used to. Remember back in the day, we could just open all the ports out and do what we need to do, the PCI card and all this.
Yeah, but the
Now
answer,
everything is so complex.
the problem with that um line of thinking is that the answer is easy if you're not overthinking this stuff like we do. Like the answer is easy in saying like, yeah, well then you have ugly, bulky devices, right? You don't have things that you can't have a computer that you would call the MacBook Air because you wouldn't have a computer that small and light. You would have to have the same thick laptops that we had 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Anuj. Like I would happily give up that kind of lightness and slickness
Yeah.
for
What is it with like innovation and sexiness? Like, because Anuj was talking about libidinal studies the other
yeah.
Yeah,
day,
yeah, yeah.
and it's something I've been thinking about a lot, right? Like this connection between technology and trying to make it more sexy. Why is that?
Yeah, that's true actually. Because there is a kind of an there is a kind of an appeal of this kind of libidinal, like erotic thing. And people have that towards devices and stuff. Like
Like a fetish.
even now, the fetish, like
Yeah.
even now, like I have a cover on my phone, so it looks super like bad. And sometimes I would take the cover out to marvel at my phone because it looks new to the
Yeah.
cover. I'm like, wow, that's some sexy piece of metal. Like, oh my God, it's so nice. And again, I'll put it back in, to keep it pure. You know what I mean?
To keep it pure.
So
Wow.
yeah, you see, and many people have that. I remember I was super obsessive, keeping my computer, everything super clean, constantly wiping it and all those when I was younger. And yeah, I mean, I think yeah,
It's an interesting thing though, Anne, because the sexiness, I can see like two sides of that in a company like Apple does it deliberately, right? Like they know what they're doing, right? They it's like they're yeah, they that's a part of the product is the slick and sexiness of it.
Mm.
But then you look at there's kind of things like there's older design examples like Dieter Rams, right? Like his old Braun designs, I think are a good example where he was a real kind of utilitarian designer. He I shouldn't say was, he's still alive. Um, he
no, maybe now he's not. Maybe now he's in Apple. He wants sexy, sleek this and stuff.
but like his designs, like they were elegant and but I wouldn't call them sexy, right? They were just kind of elegant as a result of their simplicity. Um, but the way people obsess over Dieter Ram's designs now is on par with Apple stuff. In fact, a lot of Apple stuff, like the original iPod design, is attributed to a handheld radio design that Dieter Rams did. If you compare the two, they're really similar. But he wasn't really designing for sexiness. It's not in his kind of list of design principles. Um, nothing should be done for aesthetics alone, right? In his eyes, and so, but the fans of Dieter Rams have kind of made sexiness a thing about his designs. Um, and that kind of says to me that people want it more than they know they want it, right? Um, I think it's kind of part of the attachment to things, right?
Yeah, exactly. It has a lot to do with sense of like the ego, I think. Just like, when you get a car,
Mm.
you get so obsessed with it. It's like you keep checking if anyone is like touching it or stealing it, like your first car, right? You're
Yeah,
always like on the lookout because you think that something's going to happen to it. I feel like that it's like that with technology, like this attachment. But why sexiness? I mean, it makes sense if you go into like a Freudian analysis or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's
Yeah,
You could also think about there's the sexiness as the like initial attraction, right? and then there's something that you start getting this kind of, this is going to sound weird, but like this relationship sexiness.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I remember my first MacBook Pro, which I bought with my own money that I earned, like kind of freelancing, and like it was just like real special to me in that sense that, you know, I bought it myself, kind of, and it was an aluminium one, and one of the properties of aluminium is like when you bump it, it kind of dents, right? It doesn't crack, it dents. And my MacBook Pro, after like a few years, was so kind of dented, and it had built this character that, you know, my relationship to it became special, because those, all of those dents were kind of, um, you know, reminding me of something, you know, and kind of evidence of this journey we'd been on together.
Yeah.
Sounds so
No,
weird.
no, that makes sense. But I was thinking like that sexiness fades over time, you know? It's
Mm,
like with a real person, like when you start actually having a real relationship, you make memories and you form that relationship the way, you know, you described your
yeah,
relationship with your computer. But I
yeah.
think that sexiness is like the initial kind of spark, right? Like to get you into the technology, to get you excited, to get you even aroused, I would say, right?
Mm,
Because it's like it's part of the marketing scheme. I'm just thinking of like ICOs or like these tech conferences where it's about like getting people excited about things that they may not necessarily even understand. Like there's a sense of mystery, right, to these technologies. It
mm.
correlates with like the sense of magic and technology. And I don't know. I feel like that sexiness is only necessary for the initial stage of like the advertising campaign for these
I
technologies.
mean,
That
Yeah.
there is also like the kind of I don't know, the kind of gestural eroticism that devices have. So it could be, you know, in the icons, in the vision, even like the fact that, like one of the theories I have, why are you laughing?
just, I don't know, like if I'm ever at your house and you go in your bathroom with a device, you're gonna be
No,
wondering what you're doing.
no, exactly. You see, it's a good point because that's exactly my example.
Stroking your
Is
phone.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Why do we do doom? Why do we
Yeah,
scroll?
yeah, yeah.
This is caressing your phone constantly.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
Uh,
there's a kind of eroticism, the kind of a comfort we get. Is that it's like a cat or something, you know? You're constantly caressing it, you know. Like part of the fun is just like, and you do it and you're rewarded by it.
Mm.
So it's like a cat. It's like a cat is like, you know, like they're doing all these kinds of stuff, you know, reward or meowing, whatever, you know. I'm not a cat, I'm a dog.
But
They
that's a good
also,
thing. That's a good thing about Anne's correlation, right? Like between the, like a human relationship, right? Like the sexiness is the enticer, right? The thing that gets you started. Um, but a good relationship needs to have more than that, right? Like you have to continue with, like there's then, like after the courting process. I sound like such an engineer
18,
talking
20,
about,
Oscar Wilde.
yeah, yeah,
After the honeymoon,
Courting.
we'll call it the honeymoon.
yeah, the honeymoon phase.
Exactly.
Like then there's new responsibilities for the participants, right? To continue it, right? If they want to continue it. um and if you think about that in a product sense, um like that's where someone like Apple probably has this ability to kind of have this, yeah, like to follow on from the sexiness. Like people can talk about how Apple is just this kind of you know, shiny sexy product company that, you know, people just buy it because it's shiny, right? But I think they're more than that, in the sense that they know that these are things that need to keep giving, right, in different ways after that initial courting process. And you can contrast that.
Process. Okay.
It's like a robot talking about human relationships. um but you can contrast that with, like, nowadays, um places like Amazon and Alibaba, right? They have these all of these kind of cheap electronic things from like straight from China, that are kind of made to look like Apple stuff, or or whatever. Like, so you look at these pictures, like I'm kind of addicted to just scrolling through kind of, the hot deals pages
On
on
your phone,
Amazon
or on the computer?
on a computer, because I like the pictures to be bigger.
Okay.
Um, um, but there's these products that are really good at that initial sexiness, right? Like you can see like all of these kind of, fuck, I'm gonna sound like such an idiot, but like you can see all these like, computer peripherals and things that look really good.
No, because
Anne's losing
uh,
it. Um,
because
no, but sorry, let me finish. Just one more thing. But the part of their sexiness is that they look really good and they're also really, really cheap, right? So they're really good at the courting process, because I've bought some of these things,
that there
and then
goes some
they
very
arrive,
problematic
they
sexist
arrive and
metaphor.
they're like so low
Sexy and
quality.
cheap.
They're so low quality and they'll break within a month. So like, yeah, there's something to be said about that. So I'll stop talking now, and let you guys talk.
I'm just saying you can get cancelled. You just say sexy and cheap. No,
Yeah.
because the thing is that we talk a lot about in culture about the objectification of people as sex objects,
Yeah.
but we don't talk about the subjectification of devices, of objects. It goes
Yeah.
both ways. We are not just
Yeah.
objectifying things that we desire, be it humans, be it objects,
Mm.
but we also subjectivize things. This is why, people even give names to objects. Like, this is not just a couch. This is, I don't know, Nata. I'm just giving it a name. Like, people have
Yeah.
names for their cars, for their,
Yeah.
like, a friend of mine, they've been living in an RV, or like during the pandemic, they were driving to the America, and they named the RV. It's a Russian name, so uh, sorry, I don't
But
remember.
that's a good thing.
But
That's a
yeah,
like some I'd say that I would say that some objects are more conducive to that, right? Like as far as cars go, um, I'm pretty sure that most Volkswagen Beetle owners like have a name for their car, because it has such a no, but serious. Like I've known a lot of
because it's a
Volkswagen
Nazi car.
fans.
That's
That's no, that's not what I meant. I meant because it was
oh
such
my
a
god, you are getting cancelled.
Maybe more like hippie buses. You know, the Volkswagen hippie
yeah,
bus.
the
Maybe
buses as
that.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
right, like
Yeah.
they've got so much personality
Yeah, yeah,
aside from
so much personality. Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah,
Nazi past. But
exactly. Like Fanta. Yeah.
but even like a camper van, like your friend's camper van, like it's kind of like my MacBook Pro that I had, that was part of my, like I shared so much good times.
And then how were we throwing these things once we name it? Isn't it crazy that we are
I
able
I
to,
I
it's
couldn't
like the
throw that computer away.
abortion.
That computer was in
Yeah.
that computer was in tatters. Like it was just like every part of it was broken. Um, and I kept it with me for, I don't know, like 10 years in a cupboard, um, just because I just couldn't face
It's
And
like
the
maybe
it's
you're
like
a
a
hoarder.
kid. No, it's like a kid with a stuffed animal, like they
yeah,
just
right.
they
Yeah.
get attached
Yeah,
to it
exactly.
and that's it. Like we are no different than that. Like we're
Yeah.
getting
I
same.
mean, there is that kind of abortion logic, where like how do like what is it? Not pro-choice, what is the other? Pro-life. Pro-life people would say, "Oh, it's a person already," and they're like, "No, no, 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 don't make it into a person." Then nobody wants to abort a person, you know.
Mm,
So it's like the moment we personify something, because you said personality, it's just like throwing it out just to, like, I have this problem, always had, like, computer stuff. Whenever I don't use it, it's broken. I have such difficulty throwing it out. Even like the very ritual of, like, what should I do? Like, there are those electronic stores where you can just give it back and they do some
mm.
recycling. But I always think what is missing, and I'm sure maybe we can invent something as it called, is invent a ritual of how to give it back. It shouldn't be just like you put something to recycle, especially something that like your laptop,
Mm.
which was like, completely bent or whatever. For 10 years, there should be like a proper like a burial ritual. I'm not saying you have to bury, but anything like to come up with something that gets culturally kind of approved and we start feeling, and that will really help. Also making us realize what just happened, when we buy a new thing, the same thing will happen sooner or later.
Mm.
And then maybe we will resist, I don't know, maybe we'll resist for the sexy and the cheap, and because there is also this kind of element of like of death of something where it becomes like dead to us because it doesn't work anymore, that is connected to this reality and experience of waste, like when the computer died it became waste to you, but
Mm.
still it was dead, not waste. Because for
Yeah, it wasn't
example, when
waste. Yeah.
somebody, yeah, like when my dogs died, they were not waste. I was
Yeah.
not like, okay, in the trash plastic, next day the trash comes, I put the dog. No, they were
Yeah.
my pets. So there was we buried it, we did all that, whatever we could do to be okay with that. So I think many of the products that we have, the objects that we have, become subjectivized, gain a personality, become personified, and we shouldn't just think of it as waste. We should think of it also as death, as
Mm.
dead things, like something lived and now it's dead. Now, if that is the case, and this is why, as you know, like my mother used to say this, that when Anuja's computer doesn't work, you cannot be near him. He's just like a beast. Like, it's just so mad. His life starts falling apart. Like his electronic stuff is not working. The geek doesn't know what to do. And now I understand. I will call my mother after this, tell her that she wouldn't care. But that the fact that now I realize they were like people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They become like your tribe. You just cannot take them as waste. And it just
Yeah.
feels terrible when your computer is not working. The one where you have been writing and doing stuff. You just feel like, and then all geeks have this attitude towards their devices, towards their clothes. People are into clothes, like whatever is your thing, where you feel that kind of a libidinal connection, like kind of deep
Yeah.
connection, we start personifying it. It could be computers for some people, clothes for some other people,
Yeah.
could be, I don't know, could be shoes for some people, could be glasses or whatever, right? And especially glasses, I have the same frame of glasses since I'm 9 years of age. I just don't, and now it's become a hipster frame, but it was not a hipster when I was 9 years. I've died of. So, yeah, sorry, my rant ran out.
Yeah, I guess that's how brand loyalty develops, right? Like especially with Apple products, you're like always craving for that like when you're like get a new computer, like let's say an Apple computer, you're like your fingers are like all tingly and
Yeah.
it's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some
When you
people,
open that slowly, yeah.
yeah, and some people actually go to the Apple store just for that tingliness sensation, they just
Yeah.
like frequent it, even if they're not planning to buy it. And I find that a really interesting like uh brand strategy. But
Yeah. Actually, before the Apple Store opened, before like they started doing, they launched the Apple stores. Um, I remember reading that they were going to do it, and to me, it just seemed like there's no way that would work, right? Like a store just for Apple products. Like I couldn't imagine. Um, yeah, like I don't know if this was unique to Australia, but like Australia really was like about department stores and kind of shopping malls, right? Where you're just you're just there's choice everywhere, right? Like to go to it, to think you would go to a store just for one brand. I don't think there was anything like that. I can't, maybe there's an obvious example that I'm missing, but I can't remember there being a store, um like there's stores for single types of things, but for a single brand.
there's
I
like a
don't.
clothing store, that's like a clothing store like Gap, for example.
All right, yeah, that's an obvious example, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
but
but
but Gap is, I guess even, yeah, no, that's true.
No, but
maybe maybe
that just
maybe I was just
shows. No, no, but I mean that shows your point, kind of.
yeah.
Like Apple adopted this kind of model that's very much like walking into like a clothing brand or some sort of like something that defines your identity,
Mm,
right? So
yeah. and
yeah,
and
and
and and technology has this weird thing too, where when Apple stores became extremely popular, right? And it was obviously a winning formula. Um, I remember I still wasn't convinced of it in the sense of I thought, no, it's just because it's Apple, right? And Apple is cultish, right? It has this cultish following.
And you were right.
No, but I remember even in Sydney, Microsoft opened up a Microsoft store. And then I thought, oh fuck, that's a joke, right? Who's gonna go into a Microsoft store? Right. You'd probably be worried that the roof's gonna fall down or something. Like like
I mean,
who likes Microsoft that much? And but even the Microsoft store, I remember I would walk past it and I would see all these people in there, um, you know, testing out the Microsoft phones and shit. It was just like, how?
Microsoft phones? Yeah,
Oh, back
exactly.
back when the
How?
Windows phones, I think they lured people in by having Xboxes and stuff, but
Yeah.
it was still kind of it still worked, right? I don't know if it's still there, but
No, but I think
yeah.
something that about the choice is, I think, which reminds me the fact that when something starts having a personality, when it
Mm,
becomes a person, it's out of the market. You mean like, for example, even with people like, people say I'm on the market, I'm dating or whatever. But when you really get to know somebody, they become a person in your life.
mm,
They are no more in the market. You're not comparing them constantly every day with every other person you see on the street.
mm,
They have their own unique whatever. It's not like they're better or worse. It's like a sacred object. You can't compare. Like the time I have with my kids, it's not out in the market. Nobody can pay me and say another experience is equal to that. So
yeah,
let me take over your kid. It's not. And I think that's the thing that when I told my wife, and she's not into, she's anti-Apple culture. When I told my wife that a MacBook is not a computer or a good computer, it is what a computer is supposed to be. It is just a computer. Everything else is
yeah,
just like they try to be a computer. Right? And she was so mad. She said, how could you say that? That's the cult speaking. And now I get it. It's like that's the thing. Like for me, Mac computers are like, I mean, when I was using it, now I don't use it. It's just like it becomes a person. It becomes it's
yeah,
incomparable. Even if on data, on paper, somebody showed me like what 3 years ago, 4 years ago, they added the night mode on, I think, Apple on the MacBook or
Mm.
something, right?
mm,
And I remember the room when this declared that, all the geeks were like, and on
mm,
Reddit, people were making jokes because Linux said 10 years ago, nobody gave a shit. It's like
mm,
1 million things I can do in Linux. So,
mm,
but you don't have that personality kind of, unless there are some Linux geeks, or Linux has that thing. But for most people, and I think this is part of the branding of something. When something has a brand identity, but people who are into that brand, it becomes a thing. For example, that's why people say, I only wear, I don't know, some particular brand. Why?
mm,
Because for them, it's not just a company, it's a personality, it's a connection, it's a relationship, it's out of the market. And I think what is missing, maybe, I think all this brand they should start thinking about is they should it would be even more incredible if they start having some sort of, maybe they have it, some like secular ritual of what to do when you are not using it or don't want to get rid of it. This happens to clothes, to computers, to everything, right? And if you don't have anything, if anybody figures it out, that will increase the sale, increase the attraction, the attachment, because then you can kind of like, you know, complete the circle of life,
And that you're giving away like
which
all these great marketing ideas that are going to make so much
yeah,
money for like companies. We claim IP on this. This is our
that
idea.
is true. That
yeah.
is, so this is
Verbal
token IP.
contract right here.
We
Yeah.
need to
Exactly.
we need to tokenize that. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Timestamp it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that's interesting though. The idea of what to do, not just not to do, not so much what to do after you don't need it anymore, but what to do when you're not using it. Like I can imagine like like a resting bed or something for your laptop, some sort of like special case, okay, so in the for mechanical watches, automatic
Mhm.
mechanical watches, you can get these special this is a good example of an actual real this in practice. So for automatic mechanical watches, because automatic watches, the kinetic motion is what actually winds them up. To keep them work, like it's actually best if they never stop, right? So if you don't wear an automatic watch for a few days, it'll stop, and you have to set the time again and all that stuff. But it's better for the mechanism if it keeps moving, and so you can get special cases that kind of wobble. So you put your watch in there and it just wobbles, and just so it keeps giving it energy, so it never stops. Yeah, which is like this.
Life support.
Yeah, it's like a life support, right? Like it's no, actually, it's not like life support. It's like a creche. it's like minding your
Take
babies
care.
while you're um yeah, that's a really interesting concept.
Maybe,
Babysitter.
yeah, but maybe a good idea would be to like create computer coffins, and you can personalize your coffin. No, I'm
Yeah,
telling you, people
yeah.
will buy that shit.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
they
yeah,
would,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
would store it,
iPhones
and
and stuff.
they would pay homage to it. Like they would literally bring flowers, set up like a
Yeah.
little
Or you can choose your
ceremony.
burial. You can choose your burial, right? Like where you can. There's an option to give it to Elon Musk to send it into space, or you can, like have it
Take
take
out the
it.
chip or something, like take out a component and make a necklace out of it, or I
Yeah,
don't know,
yeah,
something, like people
Yeah.
used to put like hair locks, like back in the olden days, hair locks in like these like lockets, or even in pictures, like they would have like these not paintings, but they would literally make this art craft out of people's hair that they would just keep as like these something to remember the person by after they've passed away. And you could totally do that with computers too.
Yeah.
People also do that in a creepy way as well, right? Like if you don't like making stuff out of somebody's hair.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah, it's
No,
like
no, no, no.
this.
It depends on how well you knew the person.
Oh yeah. No, because like on Craigslist and like websites where you exchange used products,
Yeah.
I think it'd be a very good thing if they also add this part of the exchange kind of ritual. Like when you do it, I don't know, you do some things, you take a photo of it with you and you NFTize it so it gets memorialized or something, or you just frame it, or I don't know, like ancestor worship lives
Mm.
on in everywhere in different forms, right? But it's still there. And some places like in India, it's like very alive ancestor worship. Native American culture is very alive. So I think there is something to that, like like the way people, especially some of our favorite products and goods, and it could be many things, not just computers, of course, computers and phones and electronic things, but even like couch and stuff, like like some of the couch that gave us so much in our life. It's weird to just like give it away and not to think about it. So maybe it could be like a limbo state where it's kept in a kind of a place where you kind of do surveys for like 3 4 days, and then somebody can they do escrow basically, and then next buyer could take it, but it's still there. So you kind of have it gives you the opportunity, the time, the space to work with your emotions, to letting go of that. I think a whole religion is waiting to happen. So yeah,
I think it's funny that you chose a couch as an example.
Yeah, that's a strange
because
one.
I had that for a couch actually. I don't have anymore, and
Despite all the time that I spent
especially
on couches, I don't think I've ever felt an attachment to it
Yeah,
in that way.
never.
I had a I had a very good couch, and somebody in New York is probably using that couch of mine. So I don't even know which person in New York.
But I think what Anne said too, about like using the chip or something to make a necklace or something, like there's something there too, because like there's the whole cheesy upcycling movement. I don't know if you've seen that, where you kind of upcycling is kind of like making more shit out of old shit. Like it's cheesy, but I'm not going in that direction. I'm thinking like the idea of using electronic stuff, um, like obsolete electronic stuff and recycling it into something that's not electronic is interesting, right? Like you said, like making a necklace out of the chip or something. It's not. It's. I'm not sure if I'm making a good point here, but
I mean, it's not to make it useful as a new
yeah,
part of a
you're
new
not trying to
product.
make it useful, right? Like, yeah, that's it. Like
You
you
are
forget about trying to make
upholding
it
the
useful.
emotional value of it, the
Yeah,
sentimental aspect of it.
yeah. Um, yeah. I think
No, that
definitely.
was my idea of the ritual, because the ritual is not like it's for you to be able to use it. In fact, it's the opposite. It's for you to recognize that it's no longer, you're not anymore in relationship, will
Mm,
not be anymore. So you have a way to move on. And maybe, and I may be wrong, maybe that will help us be less of a consumerist, you know, because we will, because the thing is, we live in happy ignorance of death. You know, if we remember and recognize death more often, our attachment would be more, I don't know, I'm not sure, but maybe more balanced, bit
yeah.
more balanced, because we would realize when buying something, when looking at something, we would like, this shit is good, but this shit is shit also, and will be shit someday, you know.
Yeah, I think
And
the more ritual you make out of um celebrating or yeah, celebrating the death of something,
yeah,
the more you'll realize uh like if you have 10 rituals for the death of a computer in 2 years, then you
yeah.
realize that you probably should be spending more money or looking for a better quality computer next time.
Mm.
Sick of having these computer funerals. Sorry.
Can you imagine? Like, I can imagine like a situation which would be terrible where somebody says, "I'm sorry, I can attend your funeral. I know it's important because I have my computer funeral." It's, you know,
Yeah, can't make it. It's a good excuse.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Or you're late to work because of your, you know, your phone funeral too.
Yeah.
Because in the morning it just died your phone. So what do you do? You know, the Apple Genius Bar would also have like some sort of a medic kind of a unit. Wouldn't be just like Genius trying to resuscitate your phone. Now
Yeah.
I'm getting carried away. Yeah,
On
Yeah.
that note,
yeah.
I think we should I think